Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we'll leave it. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, just testing the audio, everybody. Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the South Planning Committee. We are not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather on the front. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. I ask you, please, to ensure all mobile phones are switched off. Finally, to ensure members of this committee and all points raised by the public speakers or raised in the debate are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. If such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. I will now ask members to introduce themselves. Starting with Richard, please.
Richard Huffer, representing Fleet.
Tony Parsons, councillor for Basement Hill, Colin and Sutton.
Hilary Love, Church Stretton and Craven Arms.
Caroline Bagnall, Broseley.
Andy.
All right. Richard Marshall, Worfield. Lay Valley Ward.
Belwell, Severn Valley.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you turn your mic off? Thank you. Now ask officers, please. Great.
Principal Planner.
Tracy Dark, Director, Economy and Place.
David Evans, councillor for Craven Arms, Church Stretton, and chair of this committee.
Miranda Gerard, Solicitor. Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways Manager.
Okay. Can I have apologies for absence, please? No apologies?
Apologies for absence being received from Councillor Robert Hinton.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. I don't think they've been circulated yet, so.
We haven't got minutes, Chair, from this meeting.
Okay. Public question time. Public questions?
Yes, Chair, there has been a question received by Mrs. Sharon Weston, and her question is in 4 parts. She's not able to attend the committee and therefore has asked for an officer to read it out. I'll therefore read each part of the question and then the Assistant Director will read the response to that part. So the first part of the question is, what enforcement actions has Shropshire Council taken to ensure that the 3 dwellings built outside planning consent are demolished and rebuilt in compliance with planning permission? I think it could do with indicating the planning consent it's referring to.
Thank you. The council has an ongoing enforcement case for the 3 dwellings and is continuing to assess the facts about construction on site, including an assessment of an independent survey prior to commencing formal action, although the developer has been served with a 330 notice, that's a requisition for information, in preparation for such action.
The next part of the question indicates I understand that a survey of heights of the whole site, including the rejected 3 plots, was recently conducted. Could this survey, which was said also to include examining drainage issues, be published on the planning portal and be provided to myself to circulate to residents?
An independent topographical survey has been carried out on behalf of the local planning authority to verify the position and heights of the dwellings. This has just been completed, and to date we have not had the opportunity of carrying out a comparative analysis. However, the report can be forwarded to Mrs. Weston to share with the residents.
The third part of the question is, the events of the last few weeks have been a significant disturbance to residents. A number of problems remain, including the blockage of drains and air bricks for houses on Tenbury Road by the recent extension of Springfield Park. There is a risk of damp and flooding for properties, let alone loss of amenity. What is Shropshire Council doing to help get these problems resolved through building control and other mechanisms?
Building control officers have done regular inspections during the construction of all the dwellings on the site. To date, they have found no evidence that the development under construction has caused the issues identified. Officers will continue to monitor and inspect the site until final completion. In terms of the loss of amenity, this was considered when the application was originally determined some 13 years ago, and the subsequent applications later related to this scheme.
The final part of the question, which for the benefit of everyone listening does relate to the Springfield Park development at Clee Hill, which was dealt with by Planning Committee on the 13th of April 2021. That's the preamble to the questions. So the fourth part of the question is, we have suffered years of problems with this development. Will Shropshire Council hold an independent inquiry and publish the outcome to ensure that lessons are learnt? No one else should ever have to suffer like this because of failure of planning in Shropshire.
It is understood that the adjoining residents are unhappy that planning permission has been granted for the development immediately behind their property. Many of the issues they have with the developer and vice versa are civil matters, such as the overhanging of satellite dishes and flues. Shropshire Council is unable to be involved in civil matters. Furthermore, the developer, as does any landowner, have permitted development rights and can carry out some forms of development without planning permission, such as the erection of fencing up to 2 metres high. Again, the council is unable to prevent this from happening. It is unfortunate that the rear elevation of the neighbouring properties has windows to their habitable rooms, that they rely on a view over the development site. Thank you.
Thank you. We have disclosure of pecuniary interest, please. Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst it's our pecuniary interest, I would like to make the Chair aware I sit on a group called the Marches Strategic Rail Group, which is a cross-county group. Last week in a meeting, there was an agenda item that specifically discussed the power station development. I declared my membership of the Southern Planning Committee and took no part in that debate.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Any others, please? No? Okay. We now go on to item 5, which is the Ironbridge Power Station. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Yes. So this cross-boundary application was considered by committee on the 15th of June. There we go. Following an earlier approval resolution by Telford and Wrekin Council, members resolved to defer a decision to a later date to allow further clarification of viability, affordable housing, transport issues including at Much Wenlock, and healthcare funding. The application was subsequently reported back to committee on the 10th of August with further information. However, members were not satisfied that the applicant had adequately addressed the above matters and resolved to refuse the application for the following reason. The application does not provide adequate funding for healthcare provision or to mitigate the effects of the proposed development on highway infrastructure at Much Wenlock. Additionally, the 5% of affordable housing falls significantly below the requirements of Core Strategy Policy CS11 and is considered inadequate for a significant development of this nature. Accordingly, the development is considered to be unsustainable and in conflict with development plan policy. So a refusal notice was prepared, but the applicant Harworth lodged a legal complaint before this could be issued. The council subsequently obtained legal advice confirming that a decision could be issued, but by this time Harworth had submitted material changes seeking to address the refusal reason. Where a new material consideration arises after a committee resolution but before the decision is issued, it is appropriate for the matter to be brought back to the committee so that the change can be taken into account. The following amendments are now proposed. A legal agreement clause confirming a commitment to deliver a minimum of 10% affordable housing as opposed to the original offer of 5%. To provide the full level of capital funding being requested by the Clinical Commissioning Group for Healthcare, to increase the funding contribution for improvement to the Gaskell Arms junction at Much Wenlock by 100,000 to 350,000. Additionally, Harworth has agreed to amend draft conditions 19 and 20 in order to address a range of highway issues which have been identified by Councillor Claire Wilde. This includes early delivery of speed restrictions and vehicle-activated signage on the Much Wenlock Road, earlier implementation of a road and pedestrian safety scheme for the B4380 at Leeton, redistribution of £20,000 of funding to an upgrade for parking provision at Buildwas Academy School, submission of a technical report reviewing additional options for improving the B4380, to support the Council in facilitating local community liaison groups considering options for further highway improvements in Much Wenlock and on the B4380 to be delivered with the help of other funding mechanisms. And finally, to provide a mitigation scheme for the property opposite the proposed T-junction access onto the Much Wenlock Road. So in terms of affordable housing, following discussions with the Registered Provider of Social Housing, or RP, and the grant funding body Homes England, Harworth is now able to commit to a legal agreement clause stipulating a minimum of 10% affordable housing within the scheme. The additional 5% would be delivered as assisted living accommodation. Additionally, the company is willing to enter into a legal obligation to work with housing agencies to deliver further affordable housing outside of the provisions of the Section 106 agreement. It has been confirmed that delivery of 10% affordable homes through a legal agreement would not preclude Homes England funding for affordable provision above this level. So paragraph 65 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that where major developments involving the provision of housing is proposed, planning policies and decisions should expect at least to deliver 10% of the total number of homes as affordable. The amended proposals assist in meeting this national policy objective. In terms of healthcare, it's been possible to increase the healthcare funding to the CCG by two mechanisms. Firstly, the original offer of a service plot for the CCG has been withdrawn, and the equivalent value of the plot, 325,000, has been converted back into capital funding. Secondly, a sum of 88,750 has been taken from the 1 million Sustainable Transport Fund, which is effectively a bus subsidy, which has previously been agreed between the company and the councils. This is acceptable to both highway authorities. Funding from both sources yields an additional 413,750, giving a total of 913,750, which meets the CCG's request. Accordingly, they have written in support of the proposals. So in terms of the Gaskell Arms, the additional 100,000 for this junction has been taken from the Sustainable Transport Fund also, and this is supported by highway authorities. The original level of 250,000 was considered appropriate and proportionate by the highway authority in the tight financial context of the site, but obviously the extra funding is to be welcomed. The offer to front load 50,000 of this to provide a feasibility study for the junction remains. So in terms of the fund that we're using to provide this cross subsidy, the original level of the transport fund was set following consultation by the applicant with Arriva. However, whilst sustainable travel is promoted, the majority of new routes are not now supported unless they can be shown to be financially viable. It should also be noted that permission has recently been granted for a very light railway demonstrator track at the power station side, which has the potential to achieve a significant modal shift from road to rail. Harworth's Park and Ride proposals also support sustainable travel objectives, which the original Transport Fund was designed to address. In terms of consultee comments at this stage, the Council's Housing Enabling Team supports the proposals and advises that appropriate due diligence has been undertaken with respect to viability assessment. Overage clauses within a Section 106 agreement can respond to any uplift to development viability. A letter from a registered social housing provider confirms that the site meets the criteria for development of assisted living accommodation. As noted above, CCG has supported the amended proposals. The Council's Planning Policy Team confirms that the emerging Shropshire Local Plan has now been submitted to the Secretary of State following a full Council approval. It's confirmed that delivery of a major strategic site such as this would underscore the Council's ability to maintain housing supply in the longer term at above the government's minimum 5-year level and may further reduce the potential for unallocated housing sites to come forward as speculative applications. Reliability of the viability advice has been questioned in previous meeting. The report clearly sets out the reasons why members can give full weight to the reliability of this advice provided by the Council's consultant. It also explains that any additional delay in determination would necessitate rerunning the financial model due to the significant amount of borrowing required to finance the scheme. So, in conclusion, the amended proposals now commit to the delivery of a minimum 10% affordable housing, and there's potential through various mechanisms to deliver well above this level. Companies willing to commit legally to pursue this objective. Additional funding has been found for the CCG and for local traffic measures, including at gas alarms and on the B4380, and this is to be welcomed. The MPPF recognises that brownfield sites have abnormal costs which can affect viability, including Section 106 funding and the ability to deliver affordable homes. Officers have, however, negotiated carefully with Harworth and Telford and Wrekin in order to ensure that available funding is distributed optimally within the scheme. The scheme is not subject to any outstanding objections from technical consultees. It's compliant overall with relevant policies and guidance and has the potential to deliver significant benefits to Shropshire. Approval is therefore recommended. Chair, just one issue. Members were emailed, I believe yesterday, by a local resident of Billboss, Mr. Williams, and 4 points in particular were raised, which I would like the opportunity to respond to briefly here. The first point is that Mr. Williams indicates that the number of units has increased from 1,000 to 1,075. This isn't correct. It was always implicit within the scheme that there would be a social housing element, which is referred to as a retirement village, which was not incorporated as part of the 1,000-home total. We have subsequently asked the question of Harworth what the number of houses would be, and that was agreed as 75, so the total is 1,075. So nothing has changed in that respect. In terms of increase the funding at gas alarms, Mr. Williams makes the point that this is not actually new funds, and therefore we're not actually getting anything else out of the scheme. I think it is nonetheless material that there is a redistribution that has been agreed between the highway authorities and the officers, and it does assist in addressing the two of the previous refusal reasons. And in the report, there is a clear justification for why we have considered it appropriate to access the Sustainable Transport Fund in this case, and that as it currently stands with both local highway authorities, bus routes are generally not subsidised unless they are, well, effectively they're generally not subsidised. They have to demonstrate that they're viable from the outset for new routes to come on stream. So the residual funding remaining in the Sustainable Transport Fund is considered adequate for the purposes it was intended for. In terms of the rail option, Mr. Williams indicates that there is light passenger rail only. So what's happening to the 1.9 million tonnes of sand and gravel was proposed to be extracted? These are two separate issues. The very light railway runs on a conventional track. That's one of its benefits. And that's, so we have recently approved a 3-year demonstrator application for that. But that doesn't mean to say that the conventional gauge normal weight rail does not also use the rail head going into the site. So we have the option of delivering both, though the demonstrator track is on a part of sidings which would not be affected by the export of mineral from the site. Finally, Mr. Williams makes a point about there having been 2 serious accidents recently on the Much Wenlock Road, B4380 junction, and that this highlights the concerns about traffic in the local area. I think as with a number of these highway issues, there is clearly an existing situation there which is not the fault of or responsibility of Harworth. The Highway Officer is here today, Gemma Lawley, to provide further clarification on highway matters if required. I think that the officer position is that the amount of money and the level of provision which we are seeking from Harworth now, improved as it is by the new sort of amendments, is reasonable, proportionate, and fully meets the criteria for planning conditions and use of legal agreements. Thank you, Chair. That's all I want to say at the moment.
Thank you, Graham. Before I take the speakers, I'd just like to make sure that everyone knows that Councillor Dave Tremellian has now arrived. Thank you, Dave. We've got 10 speakers this afternoon, and we start off with David Turner, please, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Refusal of this application was immediately applauded by the media. Residents were very appreciative of their local councillors and this committee's robust approach in the face of intense pressure from officers. Roseley, Buildwas, Leighton, Much Wenlock and other communities breathed a sigh of relief, believing this scheme would be back in due course only after a radical overhaul, or that the inspector might consider the shortcomings identified by the committee if it goes to appeal. There has been at least one calling request to the former Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, whose response was that since Shropshire Council had refused the planning permission, the Secretary of State would have no involvement unless the applicant subsequently appeals. So the Minister had received the same message as the rest of us about refusal. Now we're told you have to consider this application again because a material amendment has arisen before the decision is issued, or rather, the officer report says the matter ought to be brought back. I'm unsure about this, and I hope that you, the committee, will tease this out. I trust you won't be cowed by another threat of an appeal. You were fully aware of the risk of refusal when you rejected the application in August. Committee reports routinely identify this. The materiality of the changes is for you to judge, but please bear in mind that the applicant is offering public funds, that's taxpayers' money, so when the applicant says they've increased confidence in affordable housing delivery mechanisms rather than any increase in available funding, this largely represents capital grants to registered government's affordable homes programme. And whilst the registered provider in question doubtless does a splendid job with its assisted living model, this is not an aspiration identified in the local place plan. And of course, this falls woefully short of Shropshire Council's 20% affordable housing policy. Additional capital funding for healthcare is offered as an alternative to a service plot because the clinical commissioning group is unsure, although it seems from the officer's statement just then that there won't, whether primary care provision is required on site. To this is added £90,000 from the bus subsidy funds. So the offer is predicated on uncertainty as to whether there will be a doctor's surgery in this new village and further erosion of bus services which are already cut to the bone. Public money again. The additional £100,000 for unquantified highways improvements is also from the hard-pressed bus fund. More public money. So these material changes either place a greater burden on the taxpayer or remove funding from one pot to bolster another. I return to the theme I've advanced before. The applicant embarked on this scheme in the full knowledge of the policy requirements. Finally, committee, I understand that you're reluctant to burden the taxpayer with the cost of a planning appeal. But if you overturn your recent refusal, we'll be saddling the taxpayer with a contemptuous reallocation of substantial public funds in lieu of the developer's contribution. There is, however, a far greater risk. If you bow to pressure and overturn your carefully considered August refusal, it will bring the planning process, local councillors, this committee, Shropshire Council and democracy into disrepute. Please refuse this application.
Thank you, David. We now have Simon Heath, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee, sir. Thank you, Simon.
Right, ready to go. On behalf of the residents of Burgos, I'm here once again to plead our case for this application to be refused until an appropriate size development is determined. Twice before, we've met, and twice before I've argued that the local infrastructure simply cannot cope with the development size of the size proposed. Today, I come with a feeling of disbelief that the development has actually increased by an additional 75 more houses, another 7.5%. The reality is this development simply will not fit our surrounding landscape. Previously, I've spoken about the road accidents, the pollution, the flooding issues, the air and noise problems, and you're seriously proposing that another 7.5% is the way forward. I didn't know about Mr. Williams' letter coming in, but I was going to mention about today. If any of you want to go back past that way, you'll see a whole fresh pile of car parts that are all piled up from the last accidents, which have already been highlighted, which is right outside. We were there. So, as we know, I live and breathe on that A4380 junction. We see once again the overshooting of lorries and near misses that happens on a daily basis. The percentage chance of all these accidents increases every time you add another house to that development. The Builders Junction is currently not a place for crossing a young child, our 6-year-old, on our way to our school at the moment, and certainly you're not going to be helping by increasing the risk. In reality, for tourists visiting Iron Bridge, there is no footpath, no crossing point, and yet you honestly feel that an increase in this 60-mile-an-hour road is justified in this heritage and tourism hotspot. The proposals to place traffic signals or an island at the bottom of the hill is going to cause even more accidents. I don't know why people can't accept that. These large vehicles simply just do not slow down and cannot slow down enough to make that turn. I challenge you once again to sleep at night when you see another death reported on the junction as a direct result of the actions that could be taken today. Or just last week, as we saw another accident with more local residents awaiting ambulances to arrive whilst parents lay covered in blood with tearful children were being cared for by ourselves. This is the reality of the junction, and you think that more cars are going to solve this situation. The increase of more cars through the Gaskell Arms junction, which already is sitting at capacity with several problems, is not an issue that can be fixed with a roundabout or traffic lights, and certainly cannot be fixed with more traffic. As we fast approach the flooding season, once again, I've mentioned it, we suggest you look at how each and every year when the river floods and closes the main routes, how Builders Bridge is going to cope, how do you propose to deal with this, and now again, you're going to increase it by another 7.5%. The road networks and infrastructure, flooding issues, all the above things I've just mentioned, just do not fit with this development of this size once again. The only thing that appears to be fitting is the money coming back from the council to the council, and that does not justify this end result. Once again, Harworth have invested too much money into getting this far, and they're not going to abandon the project. They will come back with a counter offer. So why don't you, as a council, don't be scared of rejecting this. You have good justified arguments to combat this solicitors' threats. You need to make the right decision for our rural Shropshire.
Thank you. Now call on Stephen Malloy, please.
Dear committee members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. Whilst the increased offer from the applicant 10% affordable housing is a step in the right direction, it still falls well short of the policy compliant 20%. And I also have my doubts about the affordability of the housing for local people. Shropshire supports a low wage economy with workplace earnings significantly lower than national or regional averages. With the affordable housing being offered, the applicant now proposes supplying it under the First Homes scheme, which provides 30% discount for first-time buyers. But that scheme allows the housing to be priced as high as £250,000 after the discount. So I ask you to consider how that fits in with the council's tight and affordability of housing policy that requires affordable housing to be supplied at affordable prices, regardless of property size and tenure. Planning practice guidance says that any viability assessment must be proportionate, simple, transparent and publicly available, but that has not been the case with this application. Turley, who are referred to as the independent consultant, have a comment posted on their website dated 21st of Jan 2021, referring to a site at St Helens, which says, "We have been involved with the site for a number of years, advising landowner Harworth." So, did Turley declare this? And if so, why did officers think it appropriate to use them when there was a choice of 7, plus the district valuer service, who officers assumed could not provide the required service? In view of the complexity of the applicant's viability assessment, the concerns over the conflict of interest with the so-called independent assessment, and the refusal to make it publicly available, I respectfully suggest that the only way forward is to defer any decision today until a truly independent assessment is obtained from the district valuer service. This scheme has been years in the planning. It would be 15 years before we see the housing. So I think it is not unreasonable to delay a few more months while the district valuer service carries out an appraisal to ensure that the needs of the 6,000 on the affordable housing waiting list in Shropshire are being appropriately met. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on Mr. James Healy, please. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee, please, sir.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak to this committee today. I'm here today to voice concerns as a resident of the Severn Valley. Fires in Athens, floods in Germany, flooding in Colham, and in my neck of the woods, flooding on the Brompton Lane in crosshouses, stopping residents from using their cars to access public services. All these are examples of signs of global warming and the climate emergency that is already upon us. What can we do about this? What can Shropshire do about this? You can start making housing developments that are carbon neutral housing. Currently, around 20% of all carbon dioxide emissions come from the residential sector. The Welsh Government are today building their first positive energy homes, which actually puts energy back into the grid rather than using energy that creates carbon emissions. If the Welsh Government can do it, then we can surely do it too. So how can we do this? We can go back to the viability assessment. As a professional civil engineer, I have to say the reported costs of £10 million plus for demolishing 4 cooling towers and a chimney seem a little steep. We need a fully independent viability study to be undertaken by an organisation that has no financial links to the developer. Both you and the people of Shropshire need to be confident the developer is not taking too much profit. We may find that there is indeed sufficient funds available to both provide the developer with an appropriate return and deliver carbon neutral housing on this development. We have to do this. To build housing that continues to contribute to global warming when there is an alternative would be scandalous. Shropshire Council is planning to build 30,000 homes in 20 years. You need to draw a line in the sand now. How can we as a county ever hope to reach our stated goals of becoming a carbon neutral society by 2050 if we don't score this open goal? I would suggest that you again reject this outline planning application and instead commission a fully independent, open book viability assessment which can advise on whether or not the developer can viably deliver this scheme whilst ensuring the following: that all houses are built to carbon neutral standards, that the 20% affordable homes proposal is delivered, and 3, that all current proposed funding arrangements, including SIL payments and any Section 106 agreement, are delivered in full. And one final point. Following the latest cabinet reshuffle, Michael Gove is now the new Housing Secretary. His first act has been to pause the proposed house building reforms. Bob Seeley MP, Sir Roger Gale and Theresa May have all been critical of the plan set out by the previous Housing Secretary, Robert Jenner. The general view is, as many of us believe, whilst we need to build more homes, We need to build the right homes in the right places. This proposed development is building the wrong type of houses in the wrong place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I now Councillor Lorraine Pratt, speaking on behalf of Builders Parish Council. And you also have 3 minutes to address the committee, please. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak today. Builders Parish Council exists to serve the needs and desires of our community, and this afternoon, with this application and before us again, we maintain our objection as this application, if approved, will have a long-term impact on our community that cannot be forgotten. We recognise the new proposals which have worked to ease the concerns of healthcare provision, affordable housing and road infrastructure. However, we feel they do not go far enough to address our concerns, which are the concerns of an existing community who are, along with the Parish Council, concerned that this overdevelopment is going to make the lives of our young people and the access to local employment that can be accessed via public transport incredibly difficult, if not unachievable altogether. Please do not forget that this next generation will live mostly with the effects of the development as the local roads become more overcrowded, local employment opportunities become few and far between, and the worry of what would become a neighbouring and forgotten builders village being left behind to prioritise the ongoing infrastructure needs of the new town next door. We maintain that this development is completely out of proportion to a parish of our size, and as a small rural parish with currently just over 100 homes, the impact on our local infrastructure will be significant, as will the surrounding area. As part of the site has been built on greenfield land, we feel this again seems to be a loss, that this is being forgotten. The loss of our beautiful countryside, which we all know enriches our lives and well-being in so many ways. The resubmitted plans following the refusal of the last planning committee, although they seem to address the concerns raised by the committee, we feel they do not go far enough in addressing the concerns for the need of affordable housing, and we respectfully request that the committee consider a condition to be applied to the application to make all appropriate measures to try and meet a 15% affordable housing target that can be achieved. If a very small uplift of the prices homes were raised, rather than the number of houses have been built at a site, as we do not want 1,000 homes on the doorstep anyway, let alone 1,075. We are also at a loss as to the number of houses that have been planned to be built. We also continue to believe that the highways infrastructure is not sufficient and will not be able to accommodate the increased traffic from a development of this size. Even when they consider the mitigation proposed in the application, and this will have a serious safety implications for local residents in neighbouring villages, as the roads immediately bordering the development are rural roads with existing problems of dangerous speeds and congestion at junctions at peak times. As a parish council, it is our duty to do all that is within our powers to improve the well-being of our community. This overdevelopment will have a devastating and long-lasting effect on the livelihoods of our community, whose local resources will suffer at the hands of a new town being built in our backyard. For those reasons, we maintain our objection and ask for the committee to consider and refuse the application. Thank you again for giving us the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I now call on Councillor Sue Jones, Parish Council for Leighton Parish Council. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me address the Planning Committee today. There is already a recognised traffic impact issue in the village of Leighton, and mitigating measures from Shropshire Council are long overdue. The extra traffic impact of adding up to 1,000 homes in Ironbridge will be considerable and unacceptable for all residents living along the B4380. The Parish Council is grateful that the safety concerns it has for the B4380, and particularly in the village of Leighton, have now been seriously considered. The implementation of traffic calming measures by Harworth at either end of Leighton village, as drawn up by ADC Infrastructure, is now part of a legal planning condition. The trigger time for implementation of this scheme has also been reduced from the original occupation of the 180th home to the occupation of the 50th home. This is much appreciated and we thank Harworth for this commitment. We are also pleased that a local community liaison group will also be set up to monitor the actual effects of the development going forward on the road systems. However, even with this commitment for traffic calming from Harworth, the parish council still has serious concerns. The Harworth traffic calming scheme could be several years away from implementation. The sand and gravel extraction phase at the site has to be completed first before any house building can start. Although construction traffic to and from the site should not use the B4380, this will be difficult to police, and we are concerned about the impact of this extra traffic before any traffic calming measures are in place. Whilst the Harworth scheme will slow down traffic at either end of Leighton Village, we are concerned that the scheme does not go far enough. Due to the length of the village, traffic will just speed up between the two build-outs. There are dangerous road junctions within the village and very narrow pavements. Other mitigating measures will be required. Shropshire Council have already agreed back in 2017 that traffic calming measures are needed for Leighton, and a scheme was drawn up by Michelle. Due to funding issues, these have never been implemented. This needs addressing now. We cannot keep waiting years for anything to happen. We would like confirmation and assurances that Shropshire Council will seek further funding for the extra traffic calming measures that are required and implement at the earliest opportunity. These measures would be complementary to and in addition to the already agreed ones supplied by Harworth. We cannot emphasise enough that we need help now to mitigate the current traffic problems, as well as helping to mitigate the future problems that the extra traffic from any development site will create.
Thank you. And I call on Councillor Duncan White, Parish Council for Muchburnwood Town Council, please.
Thank you, Chair.
You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, firstly, a quote from the officer's report. Harworth's traffic consultant has provided an updated technical note on the Gaskell Arms junction, which has been published on the Council's online planning register. It has not. It has not been published, and we've been denied the right to scrutinise a public document in advance of today. Can you explain the absence of this critical document? The Town Council are now forced to consider a legal challenge on this issue. We are relieved you resisted the massive pressure and threats from your own officers by refusing the application. However, it now appears that those same officers have chosen to ignore the democratic wishes of the committee by deciding to not issue the refusal notice and to bring the application back for a third time. They'll justify their actions, but make no mistake, this is entirely about refusing to accept the proper legal decision. The planning officer has publicly stated this process is unique. Why is it unique? You rejected it, and yet here it is again. Would the same thing happen if I amended my plans for an extension after you refused it? Of course not. I'd have to appeal or resubmit it. This is democracy being kicked into touch. Harworth have stated that their costs for a public inquiry would be £500,000. This is a very badly veiled threat, telling members that they will be liable for these costs if the appeal is successful. I can think of no reason for costs to be awarded to a developer who ignores a local development plan and completely denies traffic impact of their scheme. The officer's highway briefing note states that the applicant and their consultant were willing to consider any proposals put forward to mitigate the impact of the proposed development, so the matter could be dealt with through the planning system and delivered by the applicant. This is the whole point, members. This applicant put together a back-of-the-envelope scheme, completely untested, and submitted it to Highways as mitigation at the Gaskell corner. The council rejected it for 10 reasons. That's 10. But instead of going away and working on something that may be acceptable, the applicant said, oh, okay, here's 250,000, you go up with something and we're off. So this is what we're left with in Wenlock, no mitigation whatsoever. You refused this application on the grounds that the applicant had failed to carry out a proper traffic assessment in Wenlock, and particularly at the Gaskell corner. It still has not been done and nothing has changed. Finally, both your officers and the applicant refused to acknowledge that there is an issue of rat running in Wenlock. If they did, they would have to accept the proposals would make it worse and that something would have to be done, which means, of course, that we're expected just to shut up and put up. So please, stay strong, members. Do not give in to the pressure from your officers, and remember, Harworth are very wrong to assume that they will win an appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Right, we now call on the local member, Ward Councillor Claire Weil. Then you have 5 minutes, Claire. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for allowing me to address you again today. Here we all are again to debate the largest single application to come before a Shropshire Council Planning Committee. At the last meeting, this application was refused for 3 reasons: affordable housing levels, lack of infrastructure, and objections by the CCG regarding funding for medical facilities. Whilst some progress has been made, no new money has come forward. Affordable housing levels are still unacceptable and infrastructure monies remain inadequate. The redevelopment of the brownfield portion of this site is important, but not at any cost. This is the 3rd time I've spoken to you, and on each occasion, I've asked questions about the greenfield portion of the site. It represents 1/3 of the site, and only at the very end of the last meeting did officers acknowledge that it's likely to have 450 homes on it, which is significant, 45% of the total numbers on the whole of the site. Therefore, I ask committee to debate this. The letter from Pegasus refers to this being a brownfield development, but I feel that this is not an accurate description of the whole of the site. There are no conditions attached to this application to set any limits on the number or density on the greenfield portion of the site. Whilst it is widely accepted that the brownfield portion of the site needs redeveloping, it should not be at any cost. I'm surprised this application is now for 1,075 homes, as opposed to the 1,000 that was reported at the August meeting. The extra 5% affordable homes put forward for assisted living accommodation are welcome. However, the applicant is relying on the MPPF affordable housing level, which states 10% on brownfield sites, and does not take into account the large proportion, 45% minimum, that will take place on the greenfield part of the site. On this basis, the affordable housing level should be at least 15%. Providing affordable homes for the younger generation, local first-time buyers and local families with young children also needs to be recognised. Each time this application comes before us, it seems hurried and lacking detail. The applicant has always been aware of the Shropshire Council policy on affordable housing, and yet the latest offer still falls short. At the last meeting, there was mention of Homes England providing extra affordable housing. Is there now a memorandum of understanding in place between Harworth and Homes England? Has the committee had sight of this? Is there a commitment on both sides to deliver more affordable homes? These are the questions that need answers. The monies available for infrastructure needed for this site remain totally inadequate. There needs to be significant investment and interventions now due to the scale of traffic in the construction stages of the project. Whilst this is outside the remit of this committee, given that this is a strategic site for Shropshire Council, will the Highways Officer commit to front-loading adequate work for speed reduction and control on the A4169 and the B4380? This application has always been too large for the local infrastructure, a quart in a pint pot. Councillors have listened to our compelling statements from Lorraine, Simon and Sue. Sue Jones, Chair of Leighton Parish Council, talked about the B4380. a national cycle route, which will just become a racetrack, too dangerous for pedestrians, cyclists and local traffic, without interventions before the construction phase. Simon Heath, local resident who lives on the Builders Bank junction. Harworth and Shropshire Council Highways engineers both agree that the volumes of traffic that will come to this junction will make it obsolete within 2 or 3 years. There has to be massive interventions needed. This is why we are saying it is a quart in a pint pot. The A1469 is extremely fast and dangerous. Those of you who visited the site will recognise that. Lorraine Pratt, Chair of Builders Parish Council, has outlined the consequences of turning a small rural parish of just over 100 homes into a town of over 1,200.
Thanks, Claire.
Is that it? Can I just say thank you? Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Right, now call the next adjacent council board is Councillor Dan Morris. Dan Thomas, please, and you have 5 minutes, please. Dan Thomas, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about this critical application. I want to walk you through the simple reasons why this application would be unsuccessful at appeal if the developer insists on continuing with their traffic arguments in Much Wenlock. The traffic modelling from Harworth is a mix of confused, muddled, inaccurate, or simply wrong information. The applicant claims that there will be additional 51 trips in the morning and 74 trips in the evening peak. This would be bad enough and certainly not insignificant, as the applicant continues to claim. But these figures totally ignore any traffic travelling to Shrewsbury via Much Wenlock. The officer's report then says that this could mean an additional 57 and 60 trips, which is more than double their original assessment. At last, the officers now acknowledge that some traffic will come to Shrewsbury via Much Wenlock. However, they continue to mislead you by only quoting the figures of 51 and 74 trips, which they described as a worst-case scenario. But it could be double that number realistically, and that's using their own figures. I asked the officers to confirm that the figures of 51 and 74 trips do not include the traffic going to Shrewsbury. Again, on traffic, the officer's report carefully reproduces a table from the applicant's transport assessment addendum. This table shows how the applicant has modelled the Gascoigne junction. The standard approach to doing this work, and one adopted throughout the rest of the report, is to recreate the current operation of the junction using a computer model, and then to add on the development traffic and see what the impact is. This is the approach taken by the developer, except members, it is entirely wrong. In recreating the existing situation, the developer has concluded that the maximum queue in the morning peak is 3 vehicles, and that the maximum queue in the evening is 3.8 vehicles. Those of us who know this junction will realise that these figures are out of factor by at least 5. But that's not all. These queues are for the year 2036, 15 years from now. You can sit in a queue of 15 vehicles at 11 a.m. on a Saturday or a Wednesday lunchtime at any time. It is onto this completely inaccurate assessment that the developer then adds their own traffic. At this stage, it is no longer relevant how much development traffic should be added, because whatever it is, we cannot now accurately assess because the model is so wildly wrong. But just for interest, I can tell you that even with this massive underestimation, the delays to drivers at the junction more than doubles. Your officers will tell you that you must decide based on the evidence. Well, I have just provided you with the evidence. The decision is clear. The transport assessment is wrong, and the application can be refused safely on those grounds. Members, I therefore urge you to remember and consider Much Wenlock. The effect of this application's apathy will be more and more dangerous traffic rat running through our town. Yet they continue to describe the impact as not significant and minor. This is simply not true. I welcome the increase in affordable housing, but would like to have seen affordable housing for younger people, for younger local families from the parishes and a town like Much Wenlock, which has long been crying out for affordable homes for young people, with Much Wenlock just 3 miles away. There are 2 Shropshire councillors under 30 within Shropshire. I'm one of them, and I live in an affordable home. When you give local people the chance to live near where they grew up, they're far more likely to volunteer and do things in their communities. As a committee, you have a chance to defend our own policies, and for the people of Shropshire, please do so. People across the whole of the Much Wenlock division breathed a sigh of relief when this was refused last month. I acknowledge some improvements to the application, but not enough of these come from the applicant, but instead come from different sources of public money. If this application goes to appeal, all these points will be put to an unbiased, objective inspector. Remember, the applicant knew what the policies were before they started, and it is wrong for various public funds to pick up the slack to protect their profits. Members, on this basis, I urge you to once again reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I can now have Stuart Ashton for the applicant, please. Stuart, you have 9 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As you are all aware, this is the 3rd time the planning application has been presented to the Planning Committee for determination. Harworth has been working on the application for over 3 years, and it is now 21 months since the planning application was submitted in December 2019. Following the meeting on the 10th of August, I have to say I was left frustrated and disappointed with the outcome of the meeting and discussions. I have no problem with individuals, groups, and councillors raising issues or objecting to the application. This is the normal planning process that we're all working within. Members listen to all these issues and then make a balanced decision. However, what disappointed me was when an objector emails councillors and officers during the actual committee meeting, knowing you would all see his comments with the clear intention of trying to influence your decision. In my opinion, this is completely unacceptable. Furthermore, he went on to question the integrity of an independent expert without a shred of evidence. I find this disgraceful, and it never ceases to amaze me how low some people will go to try and get their point over. The committee report deals with this matter in more detail, and so I will not waste any more time on the issue today. For 10 months, the officers of Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin and Harworth worked closely to agree how to fairly distribute the 16.75 million pot of money. This money is to mitigate the impact of the development. The discussions were complicated by the fact that one authority has SIL and the other does not. The group agreed on a priority list to allocate the money. The money was allocated based on what we thought were the most pressing needs. We put education at the top of that list. Some areas of mitigation were more important for Shropshire and others for Telford, but notwithstanding these differences, we reached agreement which required compromise by both councils. In terms of health, we allocated £500,000 to the CCG to cover health matters. At the time of the Telford committee meeting in May, the CCG had not provided a detailed response, despite requests from both councils. Harworth offered a service plot to the CCG in order that a new facility could be built on site. We thought it would enhance the attractiveness of the development and it would contribute towards creating a sustainable community. Most developers are criticised for not providing facilities on site, so it is surprising that this offer has not been accepted. Harworth has therefore withdrawn the offer of a service plot and converted the capital value of the plot, which along with 88,750 from the Sustainable Transport Fund, means we are now able to fully comply with the £913,750 request from the CCG. Since the 10th of August, we've had further discussions with officers regarding the Gaskell Arms junction. We've also submitted an update highway technical note. An additional £100,000 is being provided, which can be used by Shropshire Council towards the provision of a solution for a long-standing problem at the junction. The original 5% offer on affordable housing was based on an agreed viability assessment. Harworth has always been working to try and increase the amount of affordable housing on site. We have had detailed discussions with Homes England and a local provider, and both previously wrote to the council expressing their support for the scheme and wanted to get involved in the delivery. However, I do accept that from members' point of view that whilst those discussions were encouraging, they did not guarantee that the scheme would deliver more affordable housing. Therefore, Harworth are prepared to guarantee that a minimum of 10% will be delivered on site through the assisted living offer for older people, as set out in the committee report. If, for whatever reason, we cannot reach a contractual agreement with the operator, then our fallback position will be the additional 5% will be delivered through the government's new initiative, First Homes. But whatever happens, 10% affordable homes will be delivered on site. Since the August meeting, we have continued work on site. On the 3rd of September, the tallest structure in Shropshire, 205-metre high chimney, was safely and successfully blown down, and this marks the end of 2.5 years of demolition work. The contractor will now tidy up and complete this phase by the end of this year. On the 8th of September, the new Revolution very light rail train was delivered to the site to start testing on the sidings at Ironbridge. The BLR demonstrator train has been developed to provide an attractive, cost-effective rolling stock solution that is ideally suited to operate on branch lines and will assist the business case for line reopenings and new rail services provision across the UK. This is an incredible achievement to get the operator to our site. The Government Rail Minister is at the site today, and rail organisations from the UK and Europe will start visiting the site in October, as the operators look to showcase the train. The activity will complement our bid with Telford and Wrekin Council to try and secure funding to get the train operating on the old coal line. If we are successful, this will be a complete game changer in terms of sustainable transport for local people, new residents, and the 600,000 visitors a year who travel into the gorge. Harworth are one of only a handful of companies who would buy a disused power station, and probably we are one of two who will be prepared to take the financial risk to act as a master developer on the site. We don't collect planning consents and sell them on like most developers. We want to deliver the scheme over the next 15 years. We are judged on what we actually deliver and achieve. Harworth has been open and honest in all our discussions. I hope you consider the revised offer is acceptable and you support the scheme today. Finally, I want to once again thank the incredible effort and professionalism of the officers of Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin in getting the application back in front of you today. You are a real credit to both councils. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very much. Graham, would you come back in there, please?
Thank you. There are a significant number of observations made, and I'm not going to be able to pick them all up. I think, in terms of there was some suggestion that houses would not be delivered until year 15. That's clearly incorrect. The houses will start being delivered and become occupied within probably 1.5 years of the commencement of any works, and they'll be progressively built out over that 15-year period. Yes, sorry, Chair. I will probably need a bit more time in order to choreograph my responses to some of these issues. Perhaps if I could interject when members have. Could I just ask Gemma Lawley, the Highways Officer? In fact, there have been quite a few issues to do with the safety of the junctions and the timing for delivery. Could I ask that Gemma clarifies that while I'm looking at the other questions? Thank you.
Okay, Gemma, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a number of highway matters that were raised, so apologies in advance if I haven't captured everything, but as the case officer's already recognised, that I'll be happy to take any questions later through the debate. So there was a number of matters that were raised. David Turner raised the issue with regard to the bus subsidy and the loss. Again, I'm happy to take questions, but from an officer perspective, we're satisfied that the contribution that is being offered is acceptable, and I'm happy to take questions on that matter. Simon Heath, on behalf of the residents of Buildwas Parish, raised a number of issues with regards, particularly with the junction of the Buildwas Bank and the A4169. These are acknowledged, and as part of the development, there will be mitigation measures introduced to include the roundabout at Buildwas Bank, which will include a pedestrian crossing and vehicle-activated signs. In the interim, there will be measures put in place as part of the construction management plan that will reduce vehicle speeds on the A4169, and the developer is committed to those, in addition to the speed limit reduction and the vehicle-activated signs, which will change the environment during the construction period and at the various different stages. Buildwas Parish Council, again, highway matters, and we're committed to work with all parishes through the liaison group to kind of monitor and address any issues through the construction period, and be responsive to any matters that are raised, really. Leighton Parish Council is a matter that has been discussed a few times, but the issue with the construction traffic, that will be controlled through the construction management plan, and it will be legally enforceable that HGVs will not be routing along the B4380. There'll be within the construction management plan, there'll be details of a travel plan which will control the workers and the routes that they'll take, and they'll be encouraged again to use the A5. It's acknowledged by Shropshire Council as Highway Authority that the B4380 is sensitive, and we've acknowledged all the way along that the capacity of the B4380 is less of an issue, but there are sensitivities along that route. And as a consequence, it was identified within Shropshire Council's road safety policy, which is an adopted policy in 2017, and we did have a scheme to be implemented. Regrettably, that scheme is currently being put on hold with a number of other projects. There's an ongoing review to look at all the projects that were put on hold due to budget constraints, with a view to whether they could be put back into the programme. Obviously, that is an ongoing project, and we would need to reassess the current position of a number of projects and be clear about the prioritisation and whether they remain justified. Much Wenlock Town Council, again, issues being raised with regard to the transport model and the proposals being put forward. Sorry, I've just lost my... So there was matters that were raised with regard to the proposals being not acceptable. However, from a highways perspective, we've given an undertaking that we will work with Much Wenlock Town Council with regard to the scope of the feasibility study and come up with proposed measures through different funding mechanisms to achieve an acceptable proposal for the Gastel Arms junction. Councillor Wilde had asked for confirmation with regard to the A4169 and the vehicle-activated vehicle-activated signs on the approach, and those will be put in as interim measures. And there is a commitment from that's ongoing at the moment from the Assistant Director and Director level with regards to securing additional funding for investment on the route of the B4380, and that is an ongoing matter. I've only got a few more bits, sorry. So Councillor Dan Thomas asked specific questions really for me to confirm that, correct, the assumption is that the movements through the Gaskell Arms junction do not include those that are routing towards the Shrewsbury and Oswestry direction. So what it is that they've assumed that the percentage of vehicles moving through the Gaskell Arms junction is 5%, and those are the ones that are routing towards the Bridge North and South Shropshire direction. When they put the model assessments, because of the queues at the Gaskell Arms, the transport model assumed that vehicles would be routing in a different way. So they'd identified that there was 3 potential routes that if vehicles were going from the development to Shrewsbury, depending on their destination, they would route along the A5, B4380 or the Gaskell Arms junction, and they've given an indicative split of what those are likely to be. When the information was inputted into the model then assumed that vehicles were going to reroute towards the B4380 and the A5. From Shropshire Council's perspective, we don't think that is actually representative, and I've previously confirmed that at committee meetings and within briefing notes that have been updated, that we acknowledge that there will be a percentage that route through the Gaskell Arms junction, mainly for what we call link trips, so those that are leaving the site, particularly in the morning peak, and that maybe be dropping their children off at school, or they'll be accessing local amenities within Much Wenlock. And it would naturally, you would then route through the Gaskell Arms junctions if your destination is Shrewsbury. So that is acknowledged, and the assumptions that with regard to the level of the contribution, that has been taken into account from our perspective, and we're satisfied that if we have a feasibility study done and then we can secure additional funding through other mechanisms that may come forward as part of the local plan or still contributions for the capital programme itself. I think I've answered everything, but if you want me to...
Thank you, Jeremy. I now Tracy Dart, please. Great, we'll come back to us, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. There were just a few issues I needed to collate on my notes, but in terms of the concern about the proportion of greenfield to brownfield, the applicant's viability assessment confirms that the greenfield land is required in order to make the books balance, as it were, so that land is required. So there isn't the option of just developing the brownfield land. We have to determine the application before us, and that includes the greenfield, and the viability argument for including it has been made. In terms of sustainability, Mr. Healy indicated that there are significant climate change issues, which clearly there are, and we want commitments to zero carbon homes, etc. Well, the planning, the recommended conditions do actually factor that in. Obviously, this is an outline application, and the full details would be determined at reserve matter stage regarding the types of house. However, draft condition 5 of the first report, Appendix 1, indicates that there is a sustainable design brief which Harworth have submitted, and this will underscore the sustainability credentials of subsequent reserve matters applications, and will ensure that objectives such as carbon neutrality and good sort of insulation, such like are fully factored in those subsequent applications. I just wanted to confirm to members that in fact the call-in request to the Secretary of State remains. Should members be minded to accept the officer recommendation at this stage, then Secretary of State would be notified of that and would need to make their own decision as to whether or not to call the application in based upon the information that is available at the moment. So there is a sort of an additional layer of scrutiny from that respect. In terms of the extra 75 houses, it was always the case that the proposals would deliver 1,000 homes plus a retirement village, and the retirement village was not added to a new individual portion. It's only in the last 6 months or so that we've had clarification on the indicative number of properties within the retirement village, and it's appropriate to add those to the 1,000, so that's what we've done. Regarding Mr Malloy's comments about the First Homes Initiative, the government's new initiative, Shropshire Council's Housing Enabling Officer has confirmed that the 30% reduction would qualify as an eligibility to be considered as an affordable home. So, and there are many different types of affordable home delivery. You've got assisted living accommodation, first homes, you've got many other mechanisms which can potentially be brought to bear. Of course, we have a commitment for a legal agreement 10% minimum at the moment. We have the First Homes Initiative, we have the Homes England funding, which would be in addition to, but not prevented if we have a legal agreement committing to 10% affordable delivery, for Homes England to come forward with further funding from that. Additionally, we have clawback, viability review clawback funding potentially over 3 successive reviews, each on a 5-yearly basis. All of these mechanisms can come together to assist in delivering affordable homes above that 5% level potentially. So I would emphasise that we're talking about 10% minimum commitment, and that in the context of a significant brownfield site such as this, predominantly brownfield, that is really, I'd have to say, not a bad deal. There are many situations nationally where the level of affordable provision suffers significantly, where you have viability issues, and we're in a situation where we have a minimum 10% and we're potentially able to move up to significantly above that. Mr White mentioned the fact that I had referred to this as being a unique combination of circumstances, bringing the application back to committee. And I just want to reiterate, it would not normally occur. We had a situation where there was a legal challenge. We couldn't immediately issue the refusal notice. By the time we had got legal advice on the fact that how we should respond to that, we then had additional new information from Harworth. That was a material change, and we were really duty bound to take the application back to members in order that they had the opportunity to reconsider. This isn't a kind of derogation of local democracy. It's emphasising democracy by giving the opportunity to review changes. So yeah, I mean, those are the main points that I wanted to make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg. Tracy, to come in now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just wanted to pick up on the point of the decision not being issued. The decision wasn't issued after members' decision to refuse the application because of the email from Mr Malloy during the meeting, because that had to be decided in terms of the impact that would have on the decision-making process. The decision would have been issued on the next day. There is no doubt about it. My officers do not play games with decisions. They have thousands of applications. They just get decisions issued if that's the decision of the committee. As a result of that, we had to seek legal advice as to whether we could issue the decision. That caused delays, and that resulted in the applicant coming forward with revised plans. That was legally challenged, and we then had to assess that, and here we are today. This development, there is no doubt about it, is the largest housing site Shropshire Council has had to deal with. And we absolutely get this is a difficult decision for members, but the decision has to be made. So we would ask and plead members to make a decision on this application, determine it. Obviously, we would prefer one that supports the officer's recommendation, because this is a development that is to support our communities. This is what economic growth looks like, and this is jobs and homes for our children and our grandchildren. We have 3 issues here today, which we have discussed at great length already, and we as officers have worked our utmost efforts to try and bring forward additional funding for this scheme, but there isn't any. This development has already cost £80 million investment. So that's where we are, and that's where we are with the viability assessment. As far as the highways works are concerned, and you've listened to Gemma, Gemma is a highway engineer expert. Harworths have also had their highway consultants who are experts. I'm not a highway expert. I have been in planning for 40 years. I know a lot about highways and I drive a car. I know a lot of people expect and think they're highway experts, but we really do need to bow to the better judgment, because I'm afraid that's what the inspector will do. When this application goes to appeal, if it does, the inspector will listen to that advice. He will, of course, listen to residents' views about whether there's queuing on the roads and whether there's road traffic accidents, but we'll drill down into the details of what those accidents were and whether that was about capacity, road design. The inspector will really look at that closely. So if members are minded, and it's obviously your prerogative to refuse the application on highway issues, we need to really be sure around robust evidence to defend that position as an appeal. As far as the affordable housing is concerned, it is a relief to us that we've got to a 10% position, and that's tied down in the 106 agreement, which we didn't have at the previous committee. But I have been in numerous discussions with Homes England, and they are absolutely ready to support this scheme to put the additionality in around the affordable housing. They do want to support what might be more than 20% affordable housing on this site, but they have a policy across Homes England that they cannot sign up to an MOU, have a condition, or have it in the 106. They will not do that. So we have to give you the assurance that Homes England are completely behind this scheme and do support it. I think in terms of the CCG, they're a statutory body we have to consult, and they have come very late to the table, and that's not been very helpful, and that has caused some of the issues that we've seen here today. They have said categorically they do not want land on the site. We put that offer, that would be our preference. We would prefer to see the facilities on site, but they have said they want to keep their options open. And so we've moved heaven and earth to get to a position where we can put the £913,000 into the development and support it. So I would ask members to really think closely around the issues that we've got, and we're bringing to you today, the three issues that we feel as officers we have gone as far as we possibly can, and we really do plead that we get a decision today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. Right, we now open up the committee, please. Who would like to speak? Don't all rush at once, please. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for sort of information, I seconded the motion at the last meeting to refuse this application, and so that's just to put into perspective, where I'm coming from. This new proposal does have some things that we would have wanted, in that there is now a recognition of the issues with regarding to finance for the CCG and for the road survey at Much Wenlock. It's unfortunate that this is not new money, that it's money that's been taken from another budget, which is the public transport subsidy. Hopefully that won't be needed. Hopefully the routes will be busy enough to not require that subsidy. But at the moment, as I say, it isn't new money, it's diverted money. Now, coming to the affordable housing proposal, where it's being proposed that this is now 100, I think it's 108 properties, or 10% of the development. I think the unfortunate thing with that is that 75 of those properties are being identified as being part of the retirement village, and only, well, okay, I'll say it anyway, but 75 are part of the retirement village, and my reading of it says that they're only available to people over a particular age. And that therefore, instead of having the 50 that we had before that anyone could look to buy as an affordable house, on my maths we've only got 33, if that's correct. And I'm not sure that it is, but that's how I read it.
Can I respond to that, please? Yeah, in fact, it isn't. It's a bit confusing, but they're indicating 75 or up to 75 properties from the village, retirement village, but actually the assisted accommodation, the proposal is that there would be 54 of those units. That would be the extra 5%. So it's 54 of the sort of mixed tenure affordable homes and 54 of the assisted living accommodation affordable homes. So it isn't the full 75.
Okay, so some of the in the retirement village are not affordable. I understand. Okay. All right. Well, I'll withdraw that comment. But obviously, this still falls well short of what we would expect on a normal compliant development, i.e., that there would be a 20% of affordable housing in this particular area. And obviously, the developer is reliant upon the viability assessment to mean that they don't have to provide at that level. And we've heard from both the applicant and other people about, well, you know, how reliable is that viability assessment? Would an inspector, if it were refused and it went on appeal, would an inspector take account of that viability assessment, or maybe look for a different one, or ignore it altogether? So that viability assessment is very important. And I know we've had discussion, certainly at the last meeting, where it was being suggested that perhaps it wasn't as independent as it might have been. And I understand, obviously, the position that we talked about there, whereby officers, and I think members as well, reckoned that it wasn't independent, that it was a review of the original Tustain viability assessment, which we could rely on. It is unfortunate in that, as far as the general public are concerned, if they look into the links that we received at that meeting that have been referred to earlier, obviously Turley have worked with, and are working with Harworth on other projects, not directly obviously on this project, but it doesn't help the situation that's been happening. But I do recognise that the Matt Spilsbury review is valid. Now, just moving from there, you know, I think members are being reminded in the supplemental notes that we've received in the last few days what our responsibilities are in dealing with this particular application and other applications in general. It's spelled out in there. I think officers also have to take account of, you know, what their responsibilities are, and that's to devise policies, to advise us, and to then implement the council's decisions, whether they like them or not. And we took a decision at the last meeting. I understand why it's been delayed, but, you know, the end of that last meeting was not as it should have been, in my view, where members were being basically told, you know, you've come to this decision, it doesn't agree with us, and you'll have to come up with the reasons why you're going to fight this on appeal, and we think you're going to lose. I don't think that helped the situation. So hopefully this time, you know, we will come to a decision that is a reasonable decision in the circumstances. This doesn't meet what we're looking for, I don't think, but it is better than what we had the last time.
Do you want to come in and take it?
Thank you, Chair. Well, hopefully we're not in a position where we're thinking of reasons for refusal. But just to touch on the viability consultant, it's not unusual for consultants to work for different companies. The same in the legal profession, you know, lawyers, solicitors work for different clients. The same as planning officers, you know, they go into the private sector, they come back into the public sector. This is how professional industries work and operate. So, you know, there is nothing concerning about this, but perhaps to look forward around the viability reassessment of the scheme, then perhaps it might be something that members might want to consider if they're minded to approve the application, to insist on any independent assessment later is done by consultants that, in conjunction with the chair and the vice chair of the committee, the consultants are agreed. So it gives members the comfort that later on at the trigger points when it's reassessed, that it is someone that they feel is wholly independent.
Thank you. Councillor Bollington, please.
Thank you, Chair. It would not surprise me if the Planning Committee approved this application today. The pressure on us to do so is intense, as the late papers make clear. Councils also face the prospect of having to defend their decision, should it be refused, in front of barristers at a planning appeal. That's a lot of pressure on us lay members of the Planning Committee. But the degree of pressure on us does not absolve us from our duty to make the right decision. A decision must be right in terms of our planning policies. It must be right in terms of the future of our communities. And for a site of this magnitude, it should lead to an exemplary development for our county and beyond. There are many attractive aspects of this scheme, and actually I find the concept of a new settlement at this location quite exciting. But to make the settlement sustainable, we need mixed communities. We are struggling to get the 20% affordable required by the local plan. Although we're told there is hope of Homes England coming to the rescue on affordable housing, perhaps also a local provider, we're at this stage offered specialist housing. This was already in the scheme. The extra care homes go into the S106 obligation. That means they'll be provided by a registered social landlord. That is welcome, which is fine. And then, if that scheme doesn't come off, Harworth is promising first homes, which, as we've heard, are private homes sold at 30% of the market value, which remains in perpetuity. My feeling is that neither of these options gives us the social mix we're trying to achieve, the sustainable development, settlements of this size and importance. The difficulty of achieving social mix will not go away while we're capped at 10% affordable housing and not the policy compliant 20%. And we are a county that's failing to deliver on affordable housing. Just 14.4% of homes were affordable in the last reporting period. Sustainable transport is essential for a huge scheme like this. Yet because there's no immediate demand on the Sustainable Transport Fund, it's being raided for the Gaskell Arms Junction, CCG, Build Wasport. These needs are really important, don't get me wrong on that. But if there's no Ironbridge settlement is to be genuinely sustainable, we need money to fund active travel and public transport schemes. If, as the officer suggested, bus routes have to show that they're viable before they begin. Why is there any subsidy for bus routes? The majority of buses I travel on, bus travel, are actually subsidised. As always, as we see here, buses are last in line. People without cars are last in line. Climate change commitments are last in line. The prospect of VLR is interesting, but will it connect with Telford rail stations so it can really be used sort of in Anchor for commuting? Or will people need to get in their cars to go to Shrewsbury, Wolverhampton, etc.? We are struggling to get this application approved. That's because it's not yet good enough. And I really feel we'll be undermining our new local plan before it's even approved. I will hear what other councillors say, but at this point I'm not minded to support this application, even though I certainly support the principle of development of this site. Thank you.
Councillor, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is certainly the most difficult planning application that I've had to consider, and I'm sure it is for many others. I'm concerned in the first place that the proposal for this application read, and I quote, formation of two vehicular accesses of A4169 for the development of up to, in brackets, 1,000 dwellings. Then there's a semicolon, then it says retirement village, and I do think that as there's been much discussion about 1,000 dwellings and now suggestion that another 75 have been added, I think it would have been useful for us right at the beginning to know that that retirement village was extra to the 1,000 or up to 1,000. For instance, that retirement village could have been 500 homes, we don't know. So unless I've missed it in the report, I think it would have been useful to have that 75 right from the beginning. We would have then been talking about 1,075 all the time. I agree with Councillor Boddington. I'm actually quite excited about seeing this site developed, as long as it's in the right way. And on a positive note, possibility of a minimum, well not possibility, definition of a minimum of 10% affordable housing is good. They've offered to provide the full level of funding requested by the Clinical Commissioning Group, another positive, and increase the funding for the Gaskell Arms Junction. One thing that I do also find exciting is the possibility that a light railway could easily have the capability to reduce vehicular journeys. So if the funding could be found to have that up and running in the coming years, then I think the possibility is that some vehicle journeys could decrease on the roads. And we've talked a lot about highways. One thing we can't take into consideration on this planning is noise and other forms of disturbance rising during and solely as a result of any building operations involved in that. And I think that's a shame, because this is going to be possibly 15 years if it goes ahead of, we've already had some disruption already possibly, but up to 15 years of disruption and extra traffic on the roads while the development takes place. Although of course it will be much better when it's all finished. But some of the other things that we do take into consideration as planning matters are things like loss of trees, overshadowing, loss of ecological habitats and contamination, which is a big one on this side, of course. And I must be honest, I'm still undecided as to which way I should go on this application, because I want to see the site developed. But as has been stated, I'm not totally sure that this is absolutely right. And at this stage, I would like to listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lambie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Because we're here for the third time, I think we start to lose what we got out of the site visit and the first presentation. The fact that there is the brownfield site we were developing, and that the greenfield site was actually the site for the third power station. So it was never going to be greenfield forever. The Gaskell Arms, I hear what the councillors say, and at the moment, the council are doing nothing about it. They've got this horrendous problem and nothing's going to be done, and there's no money. However, this proposal gives them an answer, albeit it'll be a few years down the line, but it will kickstart that process. They will get the review money, and it will get done for this and other SIL money. And the same for Leighton. 2017, a scheme, safety scheme, was assessed by the council that it was required because of their bad road. Nothing has been done, and nothing's been done because there's no money. However, this scheme will give them the money for that. In fact, it will enhance the scheme that they've got, and it will be better. Floodwall Bank, the roundabout will perhaps ease the problems they've got at the moment because of the queuing traffic and the speeding. Once the speed limits are reduced and the roundabout's there, that will be an improvement. So I think everybody has worked really hard to counter all the issues that the various communities had in the first place. The sand and gravel that I've read, it's in the viability that the company it'll cost them to remove that in the first place. They can't count it twice though when they come to selling it. So the profit should be, they can't say, oh well, it's going to cost us so much to get out the ground, because they've already incurred that cost, removing it in the first place to cause the levelment. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a profit there. The other thing that I just want to say, we talk about this might set a precedent of 10% rather than the 20% that the council have got. But the only precedent that it will set is where another developer comes along who's got a power station in the corner of their plot. Thank you.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Over the past few months that we've actually been sitting in committee and considering this application, I think it's fair to say it's been the hottest topic on my social media feeds and also within my email inbox. I've received emails opposed to it, but equally I've received emails in support of the development. Personally, I've been torn on this development and still am to a degree. The views of the local population, whether for or against, must be heard, and we should hear them. But we must make the decision based on evidence and whether an application is policy compliant under the MPPF and within the realms of the Shropshire's core strategy policies. As a committee, we have stated that we are not against the developer. In fact, even here today, we've heard levels of excitement about the development, and I feel that myself as well. I think to create a new community on what was the old power station site is quite exciting and potentially a pleasurable place for people to be brought up and live. What we did say, we were against and opposed to what the developers were actually offering. Concerns have been raised again today and in emails about the true neutrality of the individual tasked to check the viability study. I myself in these meetings have questioned the viability study. But like in many industries, as Tracy said, key members of staff do indeed move from company to company. And I believe this to be the case in this instance. So I'm satisfied personally that there is not a conflict of interest with Matt Spilsbury that would warrant the viability study going out for reassessing. I voiced my concerns also as to my feeling that Harworths have been attempting to do as little as possible to maximise their returns on this significant capital expenditure project. But we need to remember they're a commercial enterprise that need to do that to satisfy their shareholders. And to date, I think that has been proven to be accurate. With that said, increasing the affordable housing contribution to 10%, the commitment to work with the registered provider of social care and Homes England to increase the affordable housing makes me a little more comfortable with the levels that are on offer. They have also agreed to fund the CCG in line with some of their other developments and to the level required by the CCG, and now in fact the CCG have given their support for the development, which is stated in 6.2i in the reports back. And obviously there's also been the increase to the contribution to the improvements in the Gaskell Arms junction. In reality, is it 100% of everything I would like to see? Probably not. But it's certainly better than what was previously on offer. And it provides the opportunity to develop this mainly brownfield site. And as democratically elected members, we have a duty of care to all taxpayers to ensure we spend their money in the best possible way. Now, whilst I do not take well to threats at all, I do have to listen to the advice provided by the council officers, who are the professionals in this and are by far more qualified in this field than ever we are. So I do fear that if we refuse again, we will have a lengthy and expensive appeal on our hands that we are advised will be very difficult to win. I am still undecided and I'm still looking forward to it. I am minded, though, in this meeting to be more positive with the increases that have been offered.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak, please? Councillor Garland. Thank you.
Thank you. I accept that there has been some movement and efforts have been made to meet the concerns that we expressed when this came to us last time. Tracy Dart did say that we're looking at homes and jobs for our children and grandchildren. Well, my constituents in Broseley and the surrounding area need homes and they need jobs. However, the increase in affordable housing that is proposed is largely for the homes in the retirement village. People moving into a retirement village very often have homes of their own that they can sell in order to help fund those moves. Where is the extra help for young people, for young families, for people on a low income? And let's face it, we live in an area where wages are not high, and I feel that more assistance should be given to those people. And I recognise the points made by other speakers about the fact that these sort of low income families need to be as much a part of a new development as any other members of society, that we need to have a sort of mix of people. So that was my main point. But the other point that I would make just very briefly is that I'm surprised that the information that I had up until Friday came from local newspaper. Why are we to get our information from local press rather than having, as members of the committee, I thought that we perhaps would have received information about an improved or changed application. I would have thought we would have expected to receive that directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Can I come back in, Graham?
Can I just make a general point about housing provision? Clearly, affordable housing is a vitally important part of the picture, but I think that the government makes it very clear in the NPPF that all housing has benefits, and inspectors play a lot of weight on the benefits of housing generally. In terms of how we might sort of look at balancing that concern about the assisted living accommodation being predominantly for older people, we are expecting to say that there will be additional mechanisms available to deliver over and above the 10%. And I share your concern. Certainly there is the opportunity for that additional funding from the clawback funding, the Homes England funding, and the government's initiative for first homes, that we could specify that those elements of additional funding above the 10% prioritise younger families in order to redress the balance that may be seen to have been affected otherwise. So I would make that as a suggestion as something that members might wish to sort of make a resolution on themselves. But the key point is that all housing has benefits. The other element from that is that we're dealing with an outline application, and the subsequent details will be considered as part of the reserved matters proposals. And those will determine the detailed housing mixes for the open market housing and the affordable housing elements within the scheme. A lot of housing in Shropshire, there's a significant demand at the moment for intermediate homes where people can either move up from or move down from. That's where a lot of the strength in the market is, particularly in the south of the county. And I think that it isn't therefore simply in terms of meeting social need that we're looking at affordable housing. We're looking at an equitable balance within the sort of market, the open market housing as well. And I think there are opportunities in both respects to optimise the sustainability. We're not set in stone at the moment. There is the opportunity through the reserve matters and through consideration of how we use the funding to ensure that we do secure a sort of optimal, socially equitable scheme.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the point as well about jobs for local people. There is an opportunity, if members are minded to approve the application, a condition can be imposed to ensure that a scheme is put together around making sure that jobs are for local people as part of the development phases. So a percentage or a number of people that are local people are employed on the site. So, for example, thinking around the Mile End Oswestry site, when I've had discussions with the developer there last week, Alpha Beta have 15 people out of the 39 they've recently recruited that are local people. So there's opportunities of thinking around a wording of a condition, which is not uncommon. Lots of councils have policies in place that actually, you know, this can hang on to, so a condition could hang on to the policy. We don't have one here, but there is something we can put around wording to ensure that, you know, the scheme encourages jobs for local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Right, anybody wish to add anything? Any comments? Any proposals for the application? Councillor Upper, please.
Thank you, Chair. Probably don't want to duplicate what a lot has already been said, but I guess for me it boils down to, I don't know at what point we can reassure the local members and parish councils representing them. I don't know whether we can ever satisfy the unease that they've got. Had we given way to pressures on this council from officers, I don't think we would have achieved this step forward. I still remain uneasy with the level of compromise, I guess. Perhaps I'm a perfectionist, I don't know. This does go some way, although I think a lot of the compromise or too much of the compromise has come from officers, and maybe just a feeling I get that not enough from the developer. Yeah, there's reasons for that. I still, at this point, remain unconvinced. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upper. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, but you've been absent for part of the debate, unfortunately.
Sorry?
You've been absent for quite a bit of the debate when you went over to the, you can speak.
Yeah, unfortunately, Councillor has no consideration for sensibility, committee or otherwise.
I'll let you speak, go on.
Will you allow me to speak? Thank you. I'll keep it short. Given the inevitability of this development, fitting as it does with Shropshire Council's long-term housing plans, but also aware of the constraints placed on us by the National Planning Policy Framework to object only on planning grounds. Whilst I deeply regret having to only sympathise with the objections of local residents, I nevertheless accept, whilst not approving this application in its detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, are we well at the debate? Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody want to put a proposal forward on the application?
Having never done this before, so I'd like to put a proposal that we accept the officer's recommendation to put this forward. But I'm quite keen on those two conditions, that anything over 10% of affordable housing would then be towards younger people in the community, and the other condition that I'm not going to set the condition percentage-wise for jobs for local people on the development for the industrial side of it.
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. Have we a second proposal, please? Councillor Love, you second the proposal? Right. You want to come in, Miranda?
Thank you. With regard to that proposed condition, might I suggest, Councillor Lumby, that you suggest that perhaps a condition requires a scheme that would prioritise younger families so that the scheme could be developed, because obviously the devil's in the detail there in terms of how that is worded. As you also suggest for your other condition, a scheme to come forward to prioritise jobs, and that the wording of those conditions is delegated to the Assistant Director of Economy and Place, because clearly we need to have the precise wording.
You happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we're proposing and seconded to go with the officer's recommendation. All those who are in favour of the recommendation, please show your hands. All those against? Any abstentions, please? So that vote is carried now that we go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the date of the next meeting, and that is October the 5th, Tuesday, October the 5th. If members could just stay behind, please. There is another small item that we need to clarify. It's regarding Westgate Bridge North. So if members could stay behind there, please. Thank you. Okay. Graham, you want to come in on that, or is it?
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. An item went to committee.
No. So we're just going to take the live feed off. Thank you. I've now closed the meeting actually, and so the next date of the meeting is October the 5th. I wish everybody a safe journey home, and thank you for your input today, and thank us for the officers for all.